Hello and welcome to the very first episode of Ticking Like a Clock, a St. Mary's College of Maryland production about the modern Chinese education system. My name is Peyton Rain, and I will be your host as we delve into the complicated lives of students in the world's most populous country. A little about myself before we get started. I'm a student of Chinese language as well as Asian history and philosophy. I've traveled to China 3 times, on one occasion studying for a semester at Shanghai's Fudan University, and at another time interning with the Chinese Academy of Science. My language skills are by no means fluent, and my knowledge of China's history, beliefs, and customs is far from complete. However, during my studies, I've made quite a few contacts in, and quite a few personal impressions about, China's education system. Following my inspiration from these experiences, this podcast is backed up by interviews with students from Fudan, as well as research and information from both academic papers and articles in the news. Additionally, I do want to add a note that in American English, the terms university and college are typically used interchangeably, and I do not imply any differences between these two words within this project. Today's episode is called Getting In, and we'll be talking about one of the most important events in a Chinese student's life, the National College Entrance Examination, more colloquially known as the Gaokao. We will learn a little about the history of the exam, as well as how the system currently functions. We'll also explore some advantages and disadvantages of this test, as well as consider some potential alternatives. First up is the history and foundation of the modern Gaokao. China has had a long history with national exams. Designed to select citizens for roles of state officials, the Chinese imperial examinations tested prospective candidates on literary style, writing skills, and most importantly, the classics. This system was first truly utilized during the Tang Dynasty and lasted until the fall of the Qing, having spanned over 1,200 years. Though the name and number of examinees has changed over the years, the importance is not. In China, education and social status are heavily intertwined, and failure in academics can lead to a perception of not only personal but familial failure. Today's Gaokao involves exams that last approximately 9 hours total and are sat by high school seniors once a year, over 2 grueling days. Examinees are tested on Chinese language and math. Additionally, they can choose from a selection of foreign languages, though almost all select to be tested on English. Finally, the students have to decide between social sciences and natural sciences. In 2018, almost 10 million students sat for the Gaokao, and the 3-digit score that bears the results of the exam is the one and only determinant for entrance into university. As you might imagine, this results in a lot of pressure on students during their years in high school, and even the time before. You see, test prep has become a massive industry in China, with kids of all ages getting out of school only to immediately spend hours at expensive tutoring services. And for good reason. Getting into a good school is pretty much the only path to a good job, with many hiring managers outright admitting to tossing out the resumes of applicants from lesser known institutions. Within China, overall the Gaokao is viewed as a fair and unbiased system, and on paper, this is the case. No amount of political clout will net you a higher score. However, on closer examinations, cracks begin to appear. On the topic of wealth, it likely comes as no surprise that the more well-off areas, many of them urban, receive a much higher share of funding. Compounding this, admission priority is given to families who have lived in that region for a longer time. Perhaps more worrying are the requirements for application to sit the exam. According to a paper in the Journal of Further and Higher Education, registration for the exam includes a personal and family details, previous school attendance and educational achievement, a medical certificate confirming satisfactory health, and a moral and political assessment, or a record of a candidate's attitudes towards political policies, a criminal record check, and membership of cults. Wow. It starts off normal enough. Nothing a student in the States wouldn't submit when applying for financial aid. Definitely a slight hiccup at the medical certificate confirming satisfactory health, but without knowing the exact criteria, it's hard to make a firm judgment on this one, but it doesn't sound great. And of course, that all seems pretty good next to a moral and political assessment, which sounds like something straight out of the Cultural Revolution. Now, I'm not here to make some grand point about the superiority of Western systems. They have their fair share of flaws, or to claim that the Chinese National College Entrance Examination is somehow broken beyond repair. Having said that, it strikes me as a major issue when the most populous country in the world denies education to its citizens who might have a different political perspective. Additionally, just because there may not currently be any issues with students being denied the ability to take the test due to political leanings, Communist China's history with barring people of certain ideological viewpoints from any sort of access is something to keep in mind, especially with the ever increasing number of people speaking their minds in public online forums. Moving on, politics is not the only flaw of the Gaokao. One facet of the Chinese education system that is probably most often talked about is its focus on rote memorization. Students learn how to pass tests, and that's about it. It's become a point of contention and a slight contradiction. Parents want their children to learn practical skills and creative problem solving, but they also want them to do well in the Gaokao. It seems like the only way forward is to first change the subject matter of the test, then move on to improving its form. So, how do you improve the test? Well, it's a question that a lot of people are trying to answer. One alternative that's growing increasingly popular in China is Baosong. Baosong is a system where high school students who have excelled in their studies are invited by universities to take an exam specific to that institution. If you do well on the exam, then congratulations, you're in. At this point, most universities will waive the majority of Gaokao requirements, and students just have to score above a set minimum, something they were already quite likely to do, given their previous academic achievements. The Baosong system provides a nice incentive for students to do well throughout their high school career. However, its throughput isn't quite high enough to solve the overall problems with the Gaokao. Many universities don't accept a very large number of students through this system, and quite a few of those slots are limited to specific schools. Okay, so Baosong is great for the small number of students it applies to, but what about everybody else? I think it's fair to say that a system which takes into account more than just raw test scores would go a decent way towards improving the status quo. To make a comparison to a more familiar scene, let's compare and contrast the Gaokao with America's SAT. According to the Princeton Review, an online test prep service, the SAT is an entrance exam used by most colleges and universities to make admissions decisions. The purpose of the SAT is to measure a high school student's readiness for college and provide colleges with one common data point that can be used to compare all applicants. It includes a section on math, a section on evidence-based reading and writing, as well as an optional essay section, which is more and more frequently not valued by university admissions departments. The test takes 3 hours, with an additional 50 minutes if the essay is included, and is offered increasingly often, with 6 opportunities to take the exam in 2018 and 7 in 2019. Already, the SAT is looking a lot more accessible than the Gaokao. Now, factor in that America's ACT, a very similar alternative test, is almost as popular an option. Add that to the fact that these test scores are only one small part of what colleges and universities are looking for in applicants, taking into account high school grades in classes, extracurricular activities, and personal essays, often written, or at least modified, for each individual institution a student is applying to. This, I think, really highlights one of the fundamental differences between the Chinese and American systems. In China, students strive to achieve their highest possible scores, in the hopes of qualifying for the highest ranking university. It's a rather impersonal system, with very little decision-making on the part of students or schools, everything being decided purely by numbers. On the surface, that sounds fantastic. Surely the only way to be impartial is to ignore everything but the numbers. The problem is, that only works when everyone starts with exactly the same circumstances. Now, in the American system, it's almost the exact opposite. Students apply to their personal selection of schools, choosing to send their transcripts, test scores, and essays to any number of higher learning institutions. Many students wouldn't dream of committing to a university without first visiting the campus, meeting teachers, and seeing the dorms, and trying out the dining hall. In the United States, the university experience is about more than pure academics. It's about making good decisions and preparing yourself for living a full life away from home. That's not to say it's not without severe flaws, cost being a major one. However, I do believe our admissions process is superior to that of China. Now, is it possible for China to make a major switch and follow a much more American system? That's hard to say. The Gaokao overall has been considered a huge success, and certainly the system allows a massive number of students access to a reasonably unbiased selection process from higher education. It would be an unimaginable undertaking, both on a governmental level as well as at the university level, to completely shift the way students are evaluated. But this is not just for the benefit of the students. I believe this benefits the schools and the country quite significantly. It is a fact of life that people excel in widely different circumstances. Some people are fantastic at traditional subjects. They can sit down and answer questions about science, math, and English and demonstrate a perfect theoretical knowledge of the field. Other people don't do well in a testing environment, instead shining on projects, presentations, or real-world problem solving. These individuals are certainly no less valuable to the modern workforce, where employers are looking for capable individuals that can handle any number of unexpected tasks coming their way. And as it stands, China's system is likely to weed these very thinkers out. So, I think what I'm really trying to say here is the Gaokao doesn't have to go away, but it should be valued considerably lower, especially if accompanied by additional showcases of achievement. Let the non traditional students shine through their writing, their performance, and their ability to reason. Thank you for listening to this episode of Ticking Like a Clock, a St. Mary's College of Maryland production focusing on China's academic system. I've been your host, Peyton Rain, and before I sign off for today, I'd like to offer some thanks to those people who I couldn't have done this without. First, my advisor both in general and for this project, Dr. Jing Fu, without whom none of this would be possible. Second, the professor who didn't laugh when I came to class with a proposal for a completely different project in my hand, and immediately agreed with me when I told her, ignore this, I want to do a podcast, as I handed it in, Dr. Anne LeBlance. Third, the wonderful students from Fudan, and the person who got me in touch with them. I have decided to omit the names of all involved parties here to preserve personal privacy. Tune in next time for another episode. Thanks again, and goodbye.